Come gather round the story fire, come gather round and see.
Hey, come here, I want to tell you something before we start. I wanted to try something out a little differently. So I am going to illustrate this Storyfire episode with images of Hans Christian Andersen's paper cuts, and I also am going to share images from my trip to the Hans Christian Andersen Museum in Odense, Denmark. And peppered in will be some images of my early beginnings from the Guardian Monster work that I was doing. Some of it is clumsier than I would want to show now, but I was slowly exploring and excavating in my mind numbingly painful, slow way. I think that Hans Christian Andersen's cutting paper was a way for him to meditate, and he would tell stories while he was cutting the paper. And the cut paper didn't always relate to the stories. It wasn't like he was cutting an illustration while he was telling a story. It would just be something that he would share and would kind of like occupy the physical eyeballs of those who were listening to him tell stories while their minds were imagining the images from the story. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy.
Come gather round the story fire, come gather round and see. The monsters and the magic both are made by you and me.
Today I am going to read to you from The Complete Fairy Tales by Hans Christian Andersen. I got this book when I was lucky enough to go to Denmark for an artist residency. Hans Christian Andersen, of course, is from Denmark, so I had the opportunity to go to his museum and see a replica of his home, see some of the paper cutout artwork that he would do. It was just, for someone who loves stories, it was really wonderful to get to learn how he shaped his life with story and around stories. So today I opened up the book to The Wicked Prince. Let's see what the story has to teach us today. There was once a wicked and arrogant prince. His whole ambition was to conquer all the countries in the world and to inspire all men with fear. He went about with fire and sword, and his soldiers trampled down the corn in the fields and set fire to the peasants' houses, so that red flames licked the leaves from the trees, and the fruit hung burned on the black charred branches. With her naked baby in her arms, many a poor mother took refuge behind the still smoking walls of her burned house, and the soldiers sought for her. And if they found her, it was new food for their demonic fury. Evil spirits could not have raged worse than did these soldiers. But the prince thought their deeds were right, and that it must be so. Every day his power increased. His name was feared by all, and fortune accompanied him in all his actions. From the conquered towns he brought vast treasures, and in his capital was heaped an amount of wealth unequaled in any other place. And he caused gorgeous palaces, churches, and halls to be built. And everyone who saw all this grandeur said, "What a great prince!" They thought not of the misery he had brought upon other lands. They heard not all the sighs and all the moanings that arose from among the demolished towns. The prince looked upon his gold and upon his mighty buildings, and his thoughts were like those of the crowd. What a great prince! But I must have more, far more. No power may be equal to mine, much less exceed it. And he made war upon all his neighbors and overcame them all. The conquered kings he caused to be bound with fetters of gold to his chariot when he drove through the streets of his capital. When he banqueted, those kings were compelled to kneel at his feet and at the feet of his courtiers and receive the broken pieces which were thrown to them from the table. At last the prince caused his own statue to be set up in the open squares and in the royal palaces, and he even wished to place it in the churches before the altars. But the priests said, "Prince, thou art mighty, but heaven is mightier, and we dare not do it." "Good then," said the prince, "I will vanquish heaven likewise." And in his pride and impious haughtiness, he caused an ingenious ship to be built, in which he could sail through the air. It was gay to behold, like the tail of a peacock, and seemed to be studded with thousands of eyes, but each eye was the muzzle of a gun. The prince sat in the midst of the ship and needed only to press on a spring, and thousands of bullets flew out on all sides, while the gun barrels were reloaded immediately. Hundreds of eagles were harnessed in front of the ship, and in this way he now flew toward the sun. Deep lay the plowed field where the green peeps out from the overturned grass turf. Soon it appeared only like a flat map, and at last it lay completely hidden in the mist and cloud. Ever higher flew the eagles up into the air. Then one of the innumerable angels appeared. The wicked prince hurled thousands of bullets against him, but the bullets sprang back from the angel's shining pinions and fell down like hailstones. But a drop of blood, one single drop, fell from one of the white wing feathers. And this drop fell upon the ship in which the prince sat and burned its way deep into the ship, weighing like 1,000 hundredweight of lead, dragged down the ship in headlong fall toward the earth. The strongest pinions of the eagles broke. The wind roared around the prince's head, and the clouds, formed from the smoke of burned cities, drew themselves together in threatening towards him, like rolling masses of rock and fire-vomiting dragons, till the prince lay half dead in the ship, which at last remained hanging in the thick branches of a forest. "I will conquer heaven," said the prince. "I have sworn it, and my will must be done." And for 7 years he caused his men to work at making ships for sailing through the air, and had thunderbolts made of the hardest steel, for he wished to storm the fortress of heaven. Out of all his dominions he gathered armies together, so that when they were drawn up in rank and file, they covered a space of several miles. The armies went on board the ships, and the prince approached his own vessel. Then there was set out against him a swarm of gnats, a single swarm of little gnats. The swarm buzzed round the prince and stung his face and hands. Raging with anger, he drew his sword and struck all around him, but he only struck the empty air, for he could not hit the gnats. Then he commanded his people to bring costly hangings and to wrap them around him so that no gnat might further sting him, and the servants did as he commanded. But a single gnat had attached itself to the inner side of the hangings and crept into the ear of the prince and stung him there. It burned like fire, and the poison penetrated to his brain. Like a madman, he tore the hangings from his body, tore his clothes, and danced about naked before the eyes of his rude, savage soldiers, who now jeered at the mad prince who wanted to overcome heaven, and who himself was conquered by one little gnat. Well, that is certainly a hopeful story. There's so much that we could apply to contemporary lived experiences. And of course, we're in the United States of America, so I'm sure that many politicians and leaders in our current cabinet come to mind. But unfortunately, this is a very, very human story that shows up around the globe. It shows up in the workplace. And what do we do when we become monsters ourselves, when we find ourselves acting out? Have you ever acted out in a way that you knew you shouldn't be and you couldn't stop yourself from saying the thing that didn't really need to be said, maybe? I can only hope that leaders like the prince have that voice still alive inside them somewhere. The story doesn't give us much hope of that, but I really want to believe that everybody is redeemable at some level, even if it's beyond this realm. But yeah, I would be really interested to know, what do you do when you're the one acting like a monster? Because we all do it, maybe not to the degree that someone who has the authority and resources of a prince, but there's always someone who has less than us. Okay, that's all for this story fire today. I hope you enjoyed some of the images that I put together to watch instead of watching me. I'm trying to find my way through this. And as we go forward, learning and reading and listening together, remember that the monsters are yours, but so are the heroes, and most importantly, so is the story. The story is yours to write. Until next time, bye-bye.
Come gather round the story fire, come gather round and see. The monsters and the magic both are made by you and me.